I had to share this reading from the Federal Reserve Board that no one is talking about on proposed amendments to Regulation D and issues final rule amending Regulation D with regard to reserve requirement ratios on transaction accounts. It says Action Final Rule. Summary. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System Board is adopting as a final rule without change its March 24, 2020 interim final rule amending its Regulation D reserve requirement of depository institutions to lower reserve requirement ratios on transaction accounts maintained at depository institutions to 0%. Did you hear that? To lower reserve requirement ratios on transaction accounts maintained at depository institutions to 0%. Supplementary information, statutory and regulatory background discussion. Section 19 of the Federal Reserve Act, the Act, imposes reserve requirements on certain types of deposits and other liabilities of depository institutions. Specifically, Section 19B2 of the Act, 12 U.S.C. 461B2, requires each depository institution to maintain reserves against its transaction accounts, non-personal time deposits, and euro currency liabilities, as prescribed by board regulations for the purpose of implementing monetary policy. The board's Regulation D reserve requirements of depository institutions 12 CFR Part 204 implements the reserve requirements provisions of Section 19 of the Act. On March 15, 2020, the board announced an interim final rule amending Regulation D to lower all transaction account reserve requirement ratios to 0%, thereby eliminating all reserve requirements. And there's a footnote there. The board's interim final rule was published on March 24 of 2020. You already said that. In its March 15 press release announcing this action, the board stated, for many years, the reserve requirements played a central role in the implementation of monetary policy by creating a stable demand for reserves. In January 2019, again, that's January 2019. This was a year ago. The FOMC announced its intention to implement monetary policy in an ample reserves regime. Reserve requirements do not play a significant role in this operating framework. In light of the shift to an ample reserves regime, the board has reduced reserve requirement ratios to 0% effective on March 26, the beginning of the next reserve maintenance period. This action eliminates reserve requirements for thousands of depository institutions and will help to support lending to households and businesses. The board requested public comment on the interim final rule. The public comment period closed on May 26, 2020. The board received no comments on the interim final rule and accordingly is adopting the interim final rule as a final rule without change. Wow. This literally flew under the radar. And it was very quiet. Okay? Very, very quiet. Maybe there's people out there talking about this, but the link will be in the description of this video if you want the details. And once I find links to the other videos on Federal Reserve percentages and things of that nature, like the history or the inception of it, whatever you want to call it, I will put the link below. But anyways, I hope you guys are out there paying attention. This this is actually pretty important, okay? I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think in the comment below. I'd like some feedback about this topic. I really want to see people talking about this and paying attention to what's really happening out there. All right? Thank you. See you in the next video.